Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Ken Cerini, managing partner of Cerini and Associates, and I'm joined here today by one of my partners, Mahnaz Cavalluzzi. Mahnaz works pretty much exclusively on our nonprofit clients. While Cerini and Associates is well versed in many industries, as I think many of you know, our significant focus is on the nonprofit sector. We work with over 300 nonprofit organizations, performing close to 200 audits. So we're very, very familiar with the nonprofit audit environment. We understand that for a lot of you who go through an audit once a year, the audit could be one of the most stressful times of the year for you. Again, something that we go through each and every day, but again, not something that you guys deal with on a regular basis. So we are hoping that if you invest, the next hour with us, we can provide you with some insight into how to streamline the process, which hopefully will help to lower the stress that's associated with financial statement audits. We know that it is hard to make these type of presentations super interactive. So as I said before, if people can please just dive in, drop in some chats, communicate. Thanks, Bob. Yes, I am wearing a dress shirt. Communicate within the chat. If you have questions, throw them into the chat so that we can try to make this as interactive as possible. We are offering 1 hour of CPE for today's session. So after the session is over, everybody who registered will get an email. With that email, you'll get a copy of the presentation. You also get an evaluation form. If you want the hour of CPE, you have to send back that evaluation form to us, filled out, and then we will get you the 1 hour of CPE. In terms of moving forward, Mahnaz, you want to go to the next slide a second? So a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. So in terms of streamlining the audit process, so you can see our topics for today. So we're going to explain a little bit about how the audit process works so that you can better understand what we do and why we do and ask for certain information. We'll talk a little bit about how to prepare for a streamlined audit process and give you some insights there. We'll discuss how you can use technology to streamline the audit process. We'll talk about finding ways to increase the collaboration between us and you or your auditor if you're not working with us, so that you can build a better level of collaboration and communication in the process. And we'll discuss, even after the audit is over, steps that you can take to continue to streamline the audit process for continuous improvement throughout the year. So you don't have to kind of just listen to my voice all the time. Mahnaz and I are going to kind of just jump back and forth between slides. So Mahnaz, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Ken. So the first topic that we'll be discussing, like Ken mentioned, will be understanding the audit process. So what we really wanted to do here was sort of take a step back. Many of our clients aren't aware of the audit process from our perspective as auditors. So we thought that telling you about the process, kind of giving you some insight into what's happening behind the scenes, so to speak, give you a more holistic picture of our audit approach and give you a better and deeper understanding of the process. So there are several key stages of a financial statement audit. The first is planning the audit. So planning defines audit scope and objectives, ensuring efficient resource allocation and timeline management. So this starts right when we send you our engagement letter. So the first step in the engagement is to send you that engagement letter, which includes our anticipated timeline and a preliminary request list. And from there, you don't really hear from us until we get closer to year end, when we send out that confirmation control sheet. So one of the first steps is getting that confirmation process started. So returning that confirmation control sheet in a timely manner is one of the first places that you as a client can help us get the audit started on the right path. So getting confirmations out early allows time for us to receive responses from the recipients and actually cuts down on the amount of other support we'll need, which saves us both time. So confirmation responses are one of the strongest forms of audit evidence, a third-party confirmation, and getting those out early and getting responses from the recipients allows us to not need as much documentation later on. It also allows us to get a jump start on that testing as the responses come in. So that saves you and your team time in pulling those requests for us, and it saves us time. Anything we're able to get done ahead of time or more efficiently obviously helps the process. From there, we perform a risk assessment. So assessing risks identifies areas of potential misstatement and guides focus during the audit. This is one of the first things we do when we're really diving into the audit. It's usually after we receive the trial balance, and the risk assessment that we perform guides our testing. So we focus more energy, effort, and time on areas of highest risk during the audit. Common risk areas for almost all nonprofits include revenue and contribution recognition, tracking of restricted net assets, expense allocations, lease accounting, and any allowance or reserves for doubtful accounts that you may have. After that, we look at your controls. We look at the internal controls and we sort of design testing that would make sense based on each specific client. So when we're testing internal controls, we're verifying their effectiveness in preventing and detecting errors or fraud. That's our goal. So we always perform some level of controls testing, but this may differ from client to client. At a minimum, we perform a walkthrough of each of the major cycles, which are revenue, cash disbursements, and payroll. And in some cases, depending on the nature of the revenue stream or the control environment, we may perform more detailed controls test, maybe a 40-item test or a 25-item test, something like that is what you may have experienced us requesting items for. One thing to note is that if we identify errors or discrepancies in that controls testing, we have to select more items, which obviously adds more time on our end to perform testing and more burden on our client and their staff to pull the support for those additional items. So having a strong control environment and, keeping that sort of in check throughout the year, being organized, having all of your support, crossing all your T's, dotting all of your I's, helps in the year-end audit process as well. One of the things that we do to help create efficiency on our end, and this is we use a rotational testing methodology, which many of our clients are probably familiar with at this point. And that allows us to cycle those full tests that we're going to be performing. So it's not an increased burden in 1 year. It sort of spaces out year after year after year. And the exception to that is if it's a first year audit for us, if you're a new client to us, we do have to perform testing on all of those major cycles. But from that point forward, we do try to rotate. The next testing approach is substantive procedures. So substantive procedures involve direct verification of financial statement amounts and disclosures. So this is where we're really tracing the transactions within the general ledger to supporting documents. It's typically used for larger transactions, larger dollar amounts. And in some cases, depending again on the nature of your operations, we may focus more on our substantive procedures and cut back on the controls testing. And then finally, the step that everybody is waiting for is the audit reporting. So reporting communicates audit findings, opinions, and recommendations to stakeholders clearly and professionally. So this, I know everybody thinks, what everybody is looking for out of our audit is your financial statements, obviously, and maybe your governance letter, management letter, if applicable. We know everybody's eager to receive those drafts, but while preparing those drafts or those reports themselves isn't the most time-consuming part of the audit, we cannot provide drafts until our audit is complete. We can't provide an opinion until our audit and testing is complete. So that's obviously the last step. And really, in order for us to provide those drafts, we need cooperation along the way and everything to get the audit completed.
One of the things that Mahnaz mentioned in terms of the risk assessment, and one of the things that we kind of look at is when we're assessing risk for our clients, and Mahnaz mentioned some of the areas that we identify, but we're also looking at things like, do you have change in staffing patterns in key positions? We're looking at any new policies that you might have put in place. We're looking at any changes in regulations, whether they be funding source regulations or government regulations, changes in your IT environment. Have you implemented new software applications, external factors, the economy, things like that, new accounting regulations, new funding sources, any of those types of things will also kind of come into play as part of that risk assessment when we're going through that. So in terms of some common client challenges during the audit, Obviously, it's timely information response. So we often find that clients struggle to provide requested information promptly, which can delay the audit process. We do encourage that our clients throughout the year, as you work through things, start putting things in folders, start putting things in a place where you can find them easily. If you have an unusual transaction, make a copy of that unusual transaction and all the backup support for it so that you have all of that stuff, because if it's something that's material and unusual, we probably will be asking about it as part of the audit. So some of the things to think about if you're entering into new contracts, entering into new leases, board minutes throughout the year, your bank reconciliations, revenue and salary tie-outs at the end of the year, investment roll forwards, fixed asset schedules with recording of depreciation, AP and AR schedules where you reconcile back to the general ledger, accrued expenses. These are all things that we're going to be needing for the audit. So kind of think about that and put those things on the side as you're going through things so that you have all that stuff ready. Also, communication is super important. So if you're communicating with us on a regular basis and, we're getting for you, we use ShareFile and we put in there all the information that we're going to be needing. So that makes it really, really easy for you to understand what information we're going to be looking for. So as you finish things, start putting it up into the share file so that we have access to it. Documentation management, as I talked about, is really, really important. That's one of the things that we typically find where, clients either can't find documentation or it takes them time to pull documentation. So again, the sooner you get us information so that we can pull our samples, the more communication we have, the better off we're going to be. And look, we understand that the audit is not your sole responsibility throughout the year and during that time we're coming in to do the audit. So unfortunately, now that more audits are remote, audits seem to take a backstage to things and life kind of gets in the way. I think if we can kind of look at that time that we're dedicating to the audit, so we all know when we're going to be working on the audit, we communicate that with our clients on a regular basis. So all we ask is that, during that week or 2-week period of time that we've set aside for the audit, if you can, keep your staff attention on the audit during that period of time. Again, I understand things like payroll have to get paid and everything else, but if we can kind of work towards getting through that audit during that period of time, that'll help to ensure that the audit is done in a more effective and efficient way.
So next we'll talk about communication between auditors and clients. So there's 2 points here: clarifying expectations. So clear communication ensures all audit expectations and timelines are understood by both auditors and clients. So again, as I mentioned, that initial timeline is in your engagement letter. It's usually based on prior year, but we may not, necessarily hold you to that. At some point, we reach out regarding scheduling fieldwork, and we want to make sure that timeline works for everyone. We want to make sure it's realistic that your books are going to be closed and that you're going to be ready for that audit. And that we can allocate resources accordingly. I think a lot of the time as auditors, we get a bad rap and auditor has sort of a negative connotation to it. And I'd really like to change that. It's not us versus you, where we want everybody to be on the same page. We're all working together. Our goal is to complete the audit and get you those financial statements so that you as an organization can meet your larger goals. So we really want to work together to accomplish that. If there are any changes in anticipated timelines, obviously we understand that things come up, schedules change, people have babies or are sick or this or that. The sooner that you are able to let us know, we can shift things around. We can reprioritize different jobs or different clients or move things around, pull things forward, push things back. The more lead time we have to make those changes, the easier it is. And then that helps us, again, be more efficient and allocate resources when you're ready for us. So just, keep the expectations clear and communicate any changes with regards to timeline. And even throughout the audit process, if something happens, if we've started the audit or if there's an expected deadline and us as auditors might not be able to meet the deadline for one reason or another, or we're not getting the support in a timely manner, that's something that should be communicated so that there's no surprises really. And there's a lot of benefits to open dialogue. So maintaining open dialogue helps promptly resolve issues and fosters trust during the audit process. Like I said, we're a team. We need to be able to trust each other. We need to be able to speak openly. We really don't want anybody to hesitate to reach out during the year or during the audit. Sometimes clients might be hesitant to ask questions if they're fearful that it'll reflect poorly on them, or they think they should know something and they don't. Don't feel that way. Ask us. We'd rather educate you along the way if we can. And if you identify an issue, bring it to our attention. Don't wait for us to find it, because that's just going to delay things further. The end goal is to get everything right. That's, what we all care about. And the sooner we get to that point, the sooner we can complete the audit. So one of the things that Ken and I and all of us at Sorini always tell our clients is that we want to be a year-round resource, not a year-end nuisance. And we really mean that. Use us to your advantage. We're a full service accounting firm. We have, over 90 professionals. That includes IT experts, tax experts, accounting consultants. And I'm not all of those things, but I can be your liaison to that. So if you have questions about taxability of employee benefits, or the strength of your cybersecurity, or how to run a report in FundEasy, we can get you in touch with someone that can help, or we can provide an answer. And we want to be that resource to our clients. So please communicate openly throughout the year, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, I just had a phone call with a client today, which is December 31st year end. And we were talking because they're in the process of selling off some of their real property during the year, and they're going to be closing down one of their entities. So we started talking about the fact that, what do we need to do with respect to that? What do they need to track? We talked about liquidation accounting. We talked about a bunch of different things. And we are now going to be going into the end of the year audit, being able to understand these things, make sure we're properly planning for it, helping them now to make sure that they account for all of this stuff correctly. And again, being in a situation where, we've identified and worked through one of the risks before it happens. If that gets sprung on us when we're in there for the audit, all of a sudden now we're scrambling to try to work through this in a quick way to get through the audit, when we can all spend enough time working on it and figuring it out collaboratively during the course of the year. All right, so let's move on to preparing for a streamlined audit. I know a lot of people are asking questions, and I'm trying to answer as many of them as I can in the chat as it's going. If we don't get to all of them, we will try to, when we send out the recording, try to send out answers to the questions too. So first thing is being organized, right? We want to make sure that we're organizing and documenting financial data. So as I said earlier, you want to keep all your audit documentation together, have a strong and appropriate filing system, so that where everything is and that everything is accessible. I mean, that's really the key here, is that, during the audit, part of an audit is we're going to be looking at evidential matter, right? So we are going to need to see invoices. We're going to need to see contracts. We're going to need to see all sorts of information. Having access to that information, scanning that information into files. I know a lot of you within your accounting software include copies of the support for or copies of the invoices with the payments. That's great, so that there's access to it and we know where it is. Scanning in when you do a journal entry, the backup support for those journal entries. So if there's questions about it, all of that stuff is available. So again, it's making sure that you have a system in place where data and documentation is properly stored. You want to make sure that when you're providing information to your auditor, that information is complete, and that all of the pieces there and it's easy to follow. Again, if we don't have all the information, we're just going to be asking more and more questions. The more that we can get upfront, the more that we can ensure that everything is good, the better off we're going to be. Things like supporting schedules, do they tie to the general ledger? If your supporting schedule doesn't tie to the general ledger, we're going to be asking questions about why doesn't this tie? What's the difference? So the more you spend that extra half hour just checking before you upload it and get it to us to see that everything kind of ties out. Making sure that there's proper reconciliation. So if you have an external source of data for your revenue, or you have a separate revenue software application that you're using for billing purposes, does that tie out to the reports that come off that system? Do they tie out to the general ledger? If not, again, those are questions that are going to come up as part of the audit. So the more you can resolve upfront, the better off you're going to be. Understanding the what support you have available for grants and contributions. If you've got restricted contributions, have you gone through some level of assessment to determine that that restriction is appropriate? If you've got grants, have you looked at those grants to determine if they are if they should be recorded now, or is there some contingency attached to those grants that would push off the recording of them to a future period? So again, it's a matter of kind of going through all of that documentation and making sure that the documentation that you've pulled together adequately supports the general ledger and the financial information that you're presenting to the audit. And again, as I've said, proper documentation, organization, that's going to shorten the time it takes us to work on the audit. The more the information is accurate and you've checked it, the stronger your control environment is, and that there's people properly doing their jobs with segregation of duties and oversight and everything else. The quicker you can provide support that we need, the more streamlined this audit's going to be, and the quicker, honestly, we'll get out of your hair.
So the next slide goes over addressing anticipated auditor requests. I think this might help address some of the questions that are popping up in the chat as well. So first is proactive identification. So identifying common audit inquiries throughout the year to help streamline the audit process. As the following are available, we encourage you to provide them to your auditors for real-time feedback. So that would be, grant agreements, any contracts the organization enters into, board minutes as they are approved, send them over, your bank statements, send them over monthly, and any third-party audits that you may have had. So any of your funding source audits, send those to us, because those are the things we're going to be asking for at year end anyway, and you may have them available earlier. So as I mentioned earlier, included in our engagement letter is the preliminary request list. We do tailor that to our clients based on anticipated needs. So obviously there's going to be additional requests throughout the audit, but that's sort of a good jumping off point. And you should have that well in advance of the audit taking place. So you can use that as your starting point of the items that we're going to be requesting. And you'll see as you go through recurring audits that a lot of the items are the same year after year. So we're going to be asking for all of your significant grant agreements, any new leases, things like that. So if you have those, you can just upload them right to share file throughout the year. Even if your workflows request list, which we'll talk about workflows in a few slides, but even if your workflows request list isn't established yet, you can still use the share file, which is our secure portal, to start a fiscal year folder in there and just drop items in as you think they might be relevant, as we're going to be asking for them, or as you're checking them off of your request list. And that way any of us can access it at any time, and we can take a look at it. We can be kept in the loop throughout the year, and it helps us get a better understanding of the operations throughout the year, any significant fluctuations, things like that. So when we're looking at it at year end, we may have fewer questions for you too. Why did cash decrease so much? We might see it because we're looking at your bank statements, or we're reviewing the board minutes, and we're knowledgeable about what's going on throughout the year. And we have several clients that send us their grant agreements as they get them throughout the year to make sure that we sort of agree on the accounting treatment, especially as it comes to certain grants and contributions, and determining whether they are conditional versus restricted. It's really the difference of a few words within the agreement that could change the accounting treatment for it. And that could have a major impact on your trial balance. So that's something that we really encourage our clients. If you're unsure because it's gray and you just want a second set of eyes on it, send it to us, and we're happy to look it over and provide you our feedback in real time, so that you're not making a lot of changes at the end of the year. The information that you and management and your board are using throughout the year is relevant and timely and reliable, and it can be trusted. And secondarily, if there are any changes in operations or structure throughout the year, reach out to us. Even if you don't necessarily need help with the accounting treatment, just keep us in the know. We'd rather know throughout the year than be surprised at year end. So if you're, merging, if there are any business acquisitions, if there are any asset impairments, if there was a fire, sometimes I find out that my client had a fire at their building because I see a Newsday article about it. So reach out. I'd rather find out from you directly what's going on than finding out in an email from Newsday. So things like that, tell us. And also if there's any regulatory changes, accounting changes, things like that, we want to hear from you throughout the year. And I think I've said that already, and I'm just reiterating it here. Provide us advanced responses. So begin responding to that preliminary request list prior to fieldwork, upload those documents as they become available, and that will help avoid delays later on. So if you are able to proactively prepare for the audit, it helps the audit process move more smoothly, fewer interruptions, and less time lost.
A couple of people have asked, I did answer in the chat, but I'll say it again out loud. How long, a couple of people have asked how long it takes for an audit. It really depends. There's no set amount of time in terms of how long an audit takes. We typically try to work from beginning to end within a 2-month period of time to get everything done. From the time we start till the time we wrap up and issue a final report. But it really, really depends on, and we're not working on the job exclusively for that 2-month period of time, but it really depends on the size of your organization, the complexity of your organization, the audit readiness. The more ready you are, the faster we'll get through the process. If there are any new risks, all of these factors come into play. The other thing is also, something as simple as, look, if we set a date for the audit for a week in October and you're not ready for it and it slides a few weeks, that could delay the audit time because now we have to reposition our staff. So, there's a lot of factors that come into play in terms of how long it takes to get through an audit. But if you use a good rule of thumb, from the time we kind of start the planning process to the time that we issue the report, it's probably somewhere within 2 months. We get them done much faster if we need to, and we kind of work with you in terms of deadlines if something pops up. But you never really want to be rushed through an audit. You want an audit to kind of flow and go through effectively. A lot of the stuff that's on this slide, we talked a little bit about already, utilizing checklists and timelines. Mahnaz mentioned a couple times the fact that, you can upload information to our share file. Mahnaz is going to talk in a few minutes about workflows. Workflows is a software application that we use that can help you to kind of manage all of the items that we need. And she'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But, it really comes down to is really just, have a meeting with the auditors, understand timelines, understand everything that needs to be done, have an internal meeting with your staff and kind of go through the list of items that are needed during the audit, the request list that your auditor is putting together, and go through and determine who on your staff is going to be responsible for each of the tasks that are on that request list. Decide when the timing of those, when they're going to have them done by, so that you can kind of work backwards towards meeting that timeline that you've agreed to with your auditors as to when you'll be prepared for the audit, so that everything is ready at the time that the audit is getting started. Again, the more you put into that planning process, both us on our side in terms of planning the audit effectively, and you on your side in terms of planning to have all of that information available at the time that the audit is supposed to start. Those are things that go a long way in terms of helping to ensure that the audit stays on track and moves forward. Again, those are all things that, we want to make sure that are in place. And then also going through and monitoring, are you getting through those things? Are things open? Is someone reviewing? If someone else is working on some of the documentation, is someone reviewing it to make sure it does tie to the general ledgers we talked about earlier, that the reconciliations are there? Is all the backup support there, so that when you do upload all of that information to us, it's all complete, everything's there, it's clear, and then it allows us to get through that process quicker.
So next we'll start talking about leveraging technology to streamline audit activities. So I'm going to sort of jump ahead to the last bullet here because we've referenced it a few times. So we're going to talk about secure document sharing platforms. For us as a firm, we use Citrix Workflows, which is a component of Citrix ShareFile. So ShareFile is sort of like a Dropbox. You just sort of set up folders. Each of our clients has access to their folder. And within that is Workflows, which is an electronic request list management system. So using Workflows or ShareFile, we're able to securely share our requests and obtain supporting documentation. Having all of our requests in one place ensures that our team is all aware of the audit status and allows everyone to stay on task and allow for open communication and dialogue. So there are several benefits to using Workflows. We've been using it as a firm for a few years now. One of the first is that it's secure. Please don't email sensitive information. It's not safe. Use Workflows or use ShareFile or use something. You don't want to be sending sensitive client information or social security numbers or pay information through email. It's not the best way to do things. So that's one of the main reasons that we use ShareFile and Workflows. The second is that the entire team has access to the information in real time. So it's easy to identify which items are still outstanding, which items we have support for. We don't have to face delays. If you email something to someone and they're out sick or they're on vacation and maybe the rest of the team doesn't have that, everything is all in one place. Our whole team can access everything, so we're not necessarily waiting on one person. And from the client perspective, you can also see the list in real time. You can see what you still owe us. You don't have to ask us for an updated request list. It's a lot easier to refer back to each of the tasks and ask follow-up questions about specific items. So if you've been with us for a while, you might remember that we used to use Word documents basically to maintain our request list. And they got pretty messy over time. There would be different colors, different responses. Making sure that you're looking at the most up-to-date list was, one of the challenges that we faced. We found that we were working off of a different list than our client was maybe. So it just really helps to avoid that sort of confusion. And also, as they were sending us stuff, maybe we hadn't gone through it yet. We hadn't marked it off the list to be able to, provide an updated request list right away. So the Workflows kind of eliminated all of that and made it more organized and more functional. So then kind of working back to the other points on this slide, cloud-based security. So cloud platforms ensure documents are stored securely with advanced encryption and access control. So if you're not using Workflows or ShareFile or one of those, you should be using something else to keep your documents secure. Safe document exchange. Secure platforms enable safe and seamless sharing of documents between clients and auditors. Again, don't email things if you can avoid it. And real-time collaboration. So everybody is looking at the same list at the same time. We're on the same page. We're responding back and forth about specific tasks if there's follow-up questions. And that all sort of helps increase our efficiency during audits.
Something Mahnaz has mentioned several times, and we all have, is collaboration. This should be a collaborative process, right? I mean, it's an audit, yes, and we are independent, and we have a job to make sure that the financial information that is presented is free of material error. But it is a collaborative process. We're working together on this to ensure that the information is presented accurately. So let's talk about automating some of the routine financial processes that you have within your organization. We often find that clients are not necessarily utilizing their software to the fullest capabilities that they have. So you have software applications. A lot of the accounting applications these days are very robust. They have built-in AI in the accounting applications. They have tremendous reporting capabilities, and a lot of times the clients just don't fully know how to utilize the software applications. And they end up then pulling information and putting it into Excel and doing manual processes with that information, everything else. And not that Excel is not a a very, very powerful tool. It is an extremely powerful tool, and we use it all the time. And there's going to be some times that we are going to be asking you to pull information and throw it into Excel so that we can kind of work through that information. But the more you can utilize your accounting systems for the capabilities, and not just accounting, it's accounting, billing, other systems, for the capabilities that they're set up for, the better off you are. The more you can link your software applications so that if you're doing something within one software application, that will automatically transfer over to, let's say, your accounting software. So if you have billing software, and at the the end of each week, that information gets migrated from your billing software over to your accounting software. The more you can eliminate manual transactions and the manual aspects of systems, the better off you're going to be. The more you can kind of integrate that automation, the better off things will be. In terms of the data handling, automated systems provide auditors with faster access to accurate financial data for improved decision making. We ask our clients to give us access to certain of their systems so that we can kind of go through and utilize some of it. Things like their accounting software. Can we have read-only access to it so that we can download some of the reports that we may need. We have some clients that have portals with the government, and therefore we wouldn't necessarily have to send out a confirmation if we can have access and download the information from the portal ourselves. Or if you don't want to give us access to the portal, get on a Teams or a Zoom meeting with us and download the information from the portal with us watching and send us that information. So there are ways that we can kind of streamline some of that confirmation process and some of the other things just by having access to information and having the accurate financial data. Some of that also means, though, that, again, if you are pulling things off portals or you're pulling things out of software applications, as I said before, all of that stuff needs to be reconciled back to your accounting records, reconciled back to your general ledger. And then from a resource optimization perspective, AI is such a powerful tool, and the more we can kind of automate processes, especially repetitive manual tasks, the more you're able to allow your staff to work on things that are more important, things that are more strategic. So things like, utilizing AI to summarize credit cards so that when the credit card bills come in, those credit card bills can be summarized so that you can do the proper journal entry to record things, or utilizing systems like a bill.com, which allows for you to document the approval process in terms of payment of invoices or approval of invoices. And then there's Expensify, which allows you to utilize credit card instead of using a kind of a corporate credit card. You can pinpoint in detail how much people have access to expenditures. You can limit expenditures to certain vendors and stuff like that. The stronger the control environment, as Mahnaz mentioned, one of the things that we do as part of our audit is often is we evaluate and sometimes test control environments. The stronger your control environment is, the more controls you have in place, the more checks and balances that exist, and a lot of these software applications include those checks and balances, the more we can kind of streamline that audit process.
So Ken has mentioned it, I've mentioned it. There's a theme here of building effective collaboration between client and auditor. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next couple of slides and how we can continue to improve that collaboration. So the first is designated. So for designating knowledgeable staff for audit support, well-informed personnel. So designate staff who understand audit requirements and company processes clearly for effective communication. Have designated staff allocate specific time towards responding to our audit requests during scheduled fieldwork period to facilitate a constant flow of information, which may mean reassigning their usual tasks, to other people, or, shifting duties internally. So we want to make sure that there's a point person for the audit, that we have a main contact that we can work with. And if there is someone else that we should be assigning tasks to on the workflows, please let us know. We're more than happy to do that so that, everybody understands what they're responsible for. We understand that a lot of nonprofits work with a pretty lean accounting department. There are usually only a few people within the department, and it may be difficult to sort of set aside that time, but we do feel that if you're able to prioritize it, especially during that time that we have scheduled to work on, our audit testing, that initial fieldwork period, if you're able to set aside a few hours a day during that period where you can respond to requests, upload documentation, respond to follow-up questions, that just helps things keep moving along. We want accurate information flow, so to ensure consistent and accurate exchange of information between staff and auditors, avoid misunderstanding. Use the chat function within the workflow to clarify responses if needed on that list. And if something just seems like it's not clicking or it's sort of getting lost in translation, don't be afraid to suggest a time for a call where we can just talk through things and share screens. I know we've talked a lot about workflows and how that is a helpful tool, but sometimes it's easier to just pick up the phone, and we understand that, and we're here for that too. So if you feel like that would be more efficient, or it might be something that we suggest because it may just be an easier way than going back and forth every other day answering a question, let's just get on the call and hash it out in 10-15 minutes. Let's ask questions, let's show examples of what we're talking about by screen sharing and other tools. So that helps avoid misunderstanding and sort of make things move along. That's really the goal here. And which kind of brings me to the last point of prompt issue resolution. So empowered staff can quickly address audit questions and resolve issues to keep audits on task. So one of the ways that you sort of empower your staff is by asking them to make the audit a priority. They may feel conflicted, they're being pulled in several different directions. Give them that sort of free rein to respond to our inquiries in a timely manner, even if that means maybe pushing off something else that they would typically be working on during that time period.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. One of the things that Mahnaz kind of mentioned earlier, is that I find, and especially with some of the younger generation, you get email after email after email, and it's like people are not connecting. You got email flow going back and forth, and people are just not connecting. We definitely encourage. I take the thing, and if I send 2 emails and I'm still going back and forth on a topic, I'm picking up the phone, I'm setting up a Teams meeting, I'm doing something so that we can have a conversation face to face or on, like as a call, so that we can kind of resolve the issues. I mean, again, that's what we're here for. We're here to, and again, this part of the thing is collaboration. We're here to collaborate, and I can't say it enough. So one of the things that we find is super effective is regular communication, right? I mean, when you have breakdown in communication, that's when you start to have breakdowns in relationships and breakdowns in the flow and processes and everything else. So, one of the things that we encourage with our clients is that regular communication throughout the audit process, and even throughout the year, but definitely throughout the audit process. One of the things that every audit, especially every audit here in New York State, should start off with is a pre-audit meeting with your either board or audit committee. It actually is a requirement for under the Nonprofit Revitalization Act for there to be a pre-audit meeting. A lot of our clients don't want them. But it is something that we definitely encourage to happen. Part of the reason that those are useful is a lot of times people don't understand what it is we do on an audit, and there's a kind of a different expectation as to what an audit is. And having those pre-audit meetings go a long way in helping us to communicate with your audit committee, becoming aligned with your audit committee in terms of what it is that we do as part of an audit, and also then communicating with both the audit committee and management as to what areas of risk exist within your business so that we can focus additional time, energy, and attention to those areas of risk. If something goes wrong, and I say it all the time, if there's something that's going to go wrong within your business, I think you'd rather hear it from us than hear it from a government funder who's knocking on your door and trying to take back money, right? So, one of the things that, you definitely want to do is have that kind of alignment of thought process so everybody's on the same page in terms of what's going on. As I said, during the course of our audit, one of the things that we do encourage is we do encourage a meeting prior to the beginning of fieldwork so that we can make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what we're asking for and give you the opportunity to ask questions about anything that might be on that request list that you're unsure about. But then we also like to have weekly or biweekly calls during that fieldwork process. As I said, a typical audit once we get started lasts somewhere around 2 months. So during that 2-month period, having those regular weekly calls so that everybody can stay on task. We understand where you are in the process. We understand what some of the challenges you're facing are so that we can maneuver our staff effectively to make sure that we're continuing to work on your audit. You understand, what it is we're looking for, why if you sent something, you say, I've already uploaded that, and you still keep asking for it. Maybe there's a miscommunication as to what we're asking for, and it's not what you've uploaded, but we're asking for something more detailed with respect to what you uploaded. So I think having those regular meetings gives everybody a clear time to focus on, what's outstanding, what we need to follow up on, and also what's important. I mean, if you have staff and you're trying to assign tasks to staff, it might be important for you to understand, if there's a list of 30 items we need, which are the 5 most important items we need earliest that'll help us then to push the audit along. So again, having that regular communication, and it's funny, one of the things that we find is, we'll have a request list of items, and the day before our scheduled meeting, a bunch of items get uploaded. So if nothing else, it's also a kind of a deadline where people look at it and say, oh, my meeting is coming up, I better get some things uploaded. So again, it serves a lot of different functions. It's really important to keep that communication open and ensure that everybody's kind of on the same page in terms of how they're thinking. Having those updates help also to quickly identify if there are any issues that are coming up on the audit, right? So are we running into some challenges? Maybe there's someone who, you've assigned a task to that you don't realize has not been getting us the information that we're looking for. And we've reached out to them on several occasions and we're just not getting what we want. So having those updates kind of gives us the ability to kind of discuss things like that. Also, if we find an error, as Mahnaz mentioned, gives us the opportunity to quickly discuss like what it is we're finding. Maybe it's not an error. Maybe we're just interpreting the information wrong. And, by going over it with you during these meetings, kind of helps to kind of work through it so that we can, again, not do additional testing. It also allows the team to coordinate upcoming actions to prevent delays and surprises. So again, we like to set up these weekly meetings. We feel that these weekly meetings or biweekly meetings are important. If you're not doing them with your auditors, you really should be.
So I think one of the other points we've sort of driven home is providing timely responses to audit inquiries. So it's super important to provide timely responses. It shows cooperation, it helps keep the audit on progress without delays, and it minimizes bottlenecks. So quickly replying to our requests sort of helps us, because if there is a significant delay between when we sort of request that support and receive it, we have to refamiliarize ourselves when we get it and sort of it's harder to pick up where you left off. If we ask for something and we get it the next day, it's fresh in our mind. It's really easy for us to remember why we were asking for it and sort of, tick and tie whatever it is we were trying to do, rather than, picking something up that we haven't necessarily looked at in a few weeks. So again, just promptly replying and keeping that back and forth, that cadence of the audit helps us continue to move forward efficiently.
One thing I want to say is you got to also remember that, when you're going through your audit, that's one audit. You have one audit you're dealing with. Your auditors, typically the average senior during our busy time of the year is working on anywhere between 3 and 5 jobs at a time. So you have to understand that, if we have deadlines, part of the reason we push for those deadlines is because time is at a premium within accounting firms during certain pockets of time. Like right now, we do a lot of work with June 30th year ends, and we're very, very busy between now and December 1st when cost reports are due. So the more we can kind of stay on track with things, the more we can kind of keep the staff flowing on your engagement. Like I said, they get pulled in multiple directions on a daily basis. So it's again really, really important that we kind of stay on track and get those timely responses. So we've talked about kind of going through the audit process and some of the things that can be done to streamline, but what happens like after the audit is over? So, there's always areas for improvement, always areas for kind of creating efficiencies in the process and learning from the experience you just went through. So you just went through an audit. As part of that audit, a bunch of things came up. How do we now take that information we learned from the audit and incorporate it into what we do on a go-forward basis so that we continue to streamline the process? So having that audit debrief or feedback after the audit is over, again, is another really, really good thing you can kind of implement. So debrief sessions facilitate open discussion for identifying strengths and areas for improvement in the audit. So are there, things that you could have done better? Are there things we could have done better? We're not saying that we're perfect in this environment. So we're always looking for ways that we can improve what we do and help you to improve on things that you do. And we do take advice and we do incorporate that advice into, what we're doing on our side too. Again, these sessions we've been talking about, it's been the buzzword of the whole presentation is collaboration. It promotes collaboration between the clients and the auditors to enhance for future audit effectiveness. And feedback from debrief supports continuous improvement in audit process and outcomes. Post-audit meetings to discuss what went well and where improvements could take place to make the following year audit more efficient are only going to help all of us. It's going to help us get through the audits faster. If we get a more efficient environment, it could help save money. So, we all want to get better. We're all looking to streamline processes. Again, we're all on the same page in terms of what it is we're trying to accomplish here.
So talking about implementing those recommendations from the audit findings. So, we want you to look at our recommendations. Our findings are not meant to make you feel bad, or, obviously we're not instilling any penalties. We're not that kind of auditor. So really, we're just trying to point out the areas that need to be strengthened or could be improved, really for the benefit of the organization. So in terms of strengthening controls, implementing audit recommendations enhances internal controls to safeguard organizational assets effectively. So this sort of goes back to one of the first things I talked about, I think on one of the first slides of the presentation, that if your internal control system is not working effectively, it means, yes, more testing during the audit, but it also is putting the organization at risk. You're susceptible to fraud or error or mispostings or things like that if you don't have a strong internal control environment. The next point here is risk reduction. So acting on findings reduces operational risks and prevents potential future issues. So in addition to the risks that we identify and point out, you as an organization, management, the board, whomever, should also be performing an internal risk assessment and working to mitigate those risks through your control environment or compensating controls where needed. And, implementing our recommendations helps facilitate future audits. So addressing our recommendations leads to smoother and more efficient audits, in future years. So we don't have repeat findings. We kind of cross those things off our list, and they're not something that we have to follow up on each and every year once the issue has sort of been addressed. The next point is, this is an important one too, and I don't see it being done all that often. People don't take us up on our offer of reconciling internal financial statements. So after all of the adjustments are recorded, if we provided any adjustments as part of our audit, make sure that you're making those adjustments in your books and records, your accounting system, and agree your accounting system to the audited financial statements. And feel free to send us the trial balance once you've done that, and we can make sure that we agree. And that helps us start the next audit off on the right foot, because that's the very first thing that we do, is see if your opening equity or your opening net assets agrees to the prior year financial statements. And it's something that can be done really quickly while it's all fresh in our minds at the end of the audit. So take us up on that offer to send it to us if you're not sure and you want us to just kind of take a quick look at it and see if we reconcile.
I can't tell you how many, I was going to say, I can't tell you how many times we get the following year financial information. And when we get that following year financial information, it just doesn't tie out to the audited financial statements.
Yeah, pretty often. And sometimes it's minor and it's not a big deal, but still take us up on the offer, because we're putting it out there. And then the last point here is work our adjustments into your periodic closing procedures, especially if they're, on their recurring adjustments. So that way your ongoing financial reporting is accurate, what you're using throughout the year. They're not these big entries made at year end. And if necessary, you can obtain support from your auditors. So some examples of that is depreciation. Book depreciation quarterly. Don't book it at the end of the year. Your lease adjustments, the right of use asset and lease liabilities, don't wait till the end of the year. Record that periodically throughout the year, and it makes your internal financial reporting more accurate, more consistent with your financial statements. So there's not as many questions at the end of the year of how come the financial statements that we reviewed during the board meeting differ so much from the audited financial statements that we received, which are seemingly for the same period. So book those sort of recurring adjustments as part of your periodic closing, whether it's your monthly close or quarterly or something like that. Any accruals, even payroll accruals and things like that, paints a more accurate picture for the organization throughout the year. And it makes it more consistent with the financial statements that we are issuing at the end of the year. And again, like I said, if you need those schedules, it is management's responsibility to be maintaining those schedules. So if you don't have them, you should definitely be requesting them from your auditor so that you can continue to update throughout the year, especially things like fixed assets and the lease schedule. As there are additions or disposals, your fixed asset schedule should be reflecting that. It's not an adjustment that should be made during the audit.
All right, I got about 30 seconds left on the last slide. So maintain year-round audit readiness. So again, audit readiness isn't something that happens at the end of the year when you're preparing for the audit. The more you can do throughout the year, the better off you're going to be. So consistent organization of documents, we talked about this, improves accessibility and preparedness throughout the year. Regularly updating processes helps streamlines audits and reduces challenges during the audit. So making sure that you implement strong internal controls, maintaining appropriate documentation support we talked about, reviewing contracts, donor letters, etc., to ensure that transactions are properly recorded within your accounting system throughout the year. If you need help, reach out to your auditors and have that communication with your auditors. Reconciliation and reviews occurring throughout the year, strong oversight by your board, budget to actual reviews and stuff. Understanding and staying on top of regulations that are happening, if you have trade associations, attend those trade associations to keep track of what's happening. Open communication with your auditors throughout the year. Those are all important. You have to remember that audit effectiveness doesn't just happen at the end of the year. It occurs throughout the year. So kind of keep that in mind when you're going through things. The next slide is just us. We will send out a copy of this PowerPoint. Next slide. Is us. We will be sending out a copy of this PowerPoint along with the presentation so that if anybody does have questions and they want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us. I do want to thank everybody for attending. And don't forget that if you are looking for CPE, please complete the evaluation form. Tell us how wonderful we are and get it back to us and we'll go from there. So thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your involvement. Lots of great questions. We will be sending out responses to all the questions. Thanks, everyone, and take care.